Hi, I'm Doug with Blunt Photographic, and today we're looking at how to set your landscape exposure for very high contrast light situations like this one. I was actually sitting on this hillside trying to set my exposure to accommodate the bright sun and the shadowed flowers all at the same time. And a workshop leader said to me, "I can see you're having some issues with exposure." So he said, do me a favor, expose for the brightest area in your frame, and I'll show you something really important. Trust me. So, and I knew from experience that if I did expose for the bright area around the sun, that most likely the foreground and the point in the background would go dark, if not black. And that wouldn't be good. In fact, in the film days, we would have thrown that photo away. Pardon me. So I did what he said, and I exposed for the bright part of the sky, and then I handed him my SD card, and he said, "Follow me." Went up to his dusty old Toyota truck, and he pulled out his MacBook Pro, stuck the card in, pulled up Lightroom, and he said, "Okay, now I'm going to show you something really important." And the next thing he did really changed my thinking altogether about exposures. He just took the exposure slider and slid it to the right around 3 stops. And that's 3 stops of light on your camera. Don't pay any attention to the sky right now. I'm just looking at the shadowed areas. And you'll notice that in these areas where there was heavy shadow, there's now detail. And the most important part is there's no grain. There's absolutely no grain in there whatsoever, even after bringing up 3 stops of light into the shadows. That was a total eye-opener for me because it meant that I could start exposing for the highlights in a scene in high contrast situations like this and pull up 3 stops of shadow detail without any grain. Wowzer, what an epiphany. So I'm going to show you now how to, what I would do just to put a couple quick edits on this photo to bring the general exposure in line with what I like to see. So I learned a couple more things that day as well, that after 2012, the major camera brands were using sensors that gave a lot more exposure latitude into the shadows. You can see the chart here. It shows the major brands and how many stops of detail you'll have in your shadows before there's any grain at all. That's really good to know because, again, you can expose for the highlights then, and then just when you get into post, later and you do your editing, you just bring up the shadow detail and still maintain your highlights. That's extremely important. The second thing I learned that particular day was that you will rarely find yourself in a landscape photography situation where you've got contrasty light and this system won't work. With that 3 stops of latitude on my Sony, I've had no issues whatsoever shooting at a high contrast light and then being able to recover shadow detail later on in post.